Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're looking at how small changes can lead to big results in your life.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, and get this, our source material is an episode of the English Leap podcast.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but I don't know if I'm trying to learn English right now.
I hear you, but trust me, they use the process of learning English as a metaphor for personal growth in a way that applies to everyone. They jump right into why so many of us struggle to change even though we really want to.
Yeah, I think we've all been there. What do they say it is?
They point to four big roadblocks: fear of failure, lacking clear direction, that negative self-talk, and just waiting around for motivation to strike. Have you ever felt any of those things holding you back?
Yeah, absolutely. All the time,
Yeah.
especially that fear of failing. It can be paralyzing. Like, what if I put in all this effort and fall flat on my face? It's easier to just not even try sometimes.
I know exactly what you mean, but the podcast actually says, well, what if you try and succeed?
Oh, I like that. It kind of flips the script, doesn't it?
Totally. It shifts your focus from the fear to the possibility of success. And this ties into what they say about negative self-talk. If you're always telling yourself you're not good enough or you're going to fail, you're basically setting yourself up for failure before you even begin.
Right. It's like you're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. But how do you actually change that? It's so easy to get stuck in those negative thought patterns.
They emphasize the importance of actively challenging those negative thoughts and replacing them with positive affirmations.
Ah, affirmations, right? But do those really work?
Well, here's the cool part. The podcast talks about the reticular activating system, or the RAS. Think of it as a filter in your brain that decides what you pay attention to.
Okay, I'm following.
So if you're constantly feeding yourself negative messages, your brain starts looking for evidence to back that up and ignores all the good stuff.
Oh, wow. So we're actually training our brains to focus on the negative without even realizing it.
Huh.
But that also means we can train it to focus on the positive, right?
Exactly. By choosing to focus on positive thoughts and affirmations, you can actually reprogram your RAS to look for proof of your strengths and your potential. They even talk about this fascinating example.
What's that?
Imagine you learn a new word, and then suddenly you start hearing it everywhere.
Oh, yeah, that's happened to me. It's like it was always there, but I just wasn't noticing it before.
Exactly. That's your RAS in action. And it works the same way with positive and negative information.
So it's about consciously choosing what we feed our minds, both in terms of the thoughts we have and the information we consume.
Absolutely. But it's not just about thinking positive thoughts. It's also about taking action, even if you don't feel like it at first.
I struggle with that. I always feel like I need to wait for the motivation to hit me before I can start anything.
I know, me too. But the podcast actually argues that motivation often comes after you start doing something, not before. Kind of like a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Yeah, I guess you just got to take that first step, even if it's small. But do they give any specific advice on how to get started when you're feeling stuck?
Yeah, they talk about this thing called the 1% rule. Basically, making tiny, consistent improvements over time can lead to huge results. They compare it to compound interest.
It's okay, I can see that. Like, if you just put a little bit of money away each day, it can grow into a lot over time. But you give me a real-life example. How does that 1% rule actually play out?
They give this amazing example of someone who became fluent in English simply by listening to podcasts consistently. Not some fancy language course, not living abroad, just listening to podcasts every day.
Wow, that's impressive. So it's about consistency and those small gains building upon each other over time. I get it now.
It's like that atomic habits idea from James Clear.
Yeah, where small changes become part of who you are.
Exactly. Which brings us to another big piece of the puzzle: mindset. They talk about the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset.
Okay, haven't heard those terms before. What do they mean?
Well, folks with a growth mindset believe they can improve, even in areas where they're struggling. They see challenges as chances to learn, not threats.
So it's about believing in your ability to grow and change rather than seeing your abilities as set in stone.
Exactly. And you know what? This loops back to the RAS we were talking about earlier. If you believe you can grow, your brain starts seeking out evidence that supports that belief. You become more aware of opportunities to learn and are more likely to keep going when things get tough.
Wow, our beliefs really do shape our reality, huh?
It's crazy, right? But just knowing about growth mindset isn't enough. The podcast actually gives some techniques to develop this mindset, like affirmations, visualization, and practicing gratitude.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about those.
So affirmations, those are like positive statements you say to yourself to counteract those negative thoughts. Visualization is creating a mental picture of yourself achieving your goals, which can actually trick your brain into believing it's possible.
Okay, those make sense. And gratitude.
Gratitude is about shifting your focus from what you lack to what you already have. It boosts your mood and can actually make you feel more abundant.
It's like we're building a toolkit for success, huh? These tools can help us rewire our brains for positive change.
Totally. And the best part is, these tools are available to everyone. It's not about some special talent. It's about making a conscious choice to grow and using these techniques to help you on your journey.
I like that. It feels empowering.
It is. Now, on top of all that, they talk about the role of your environment.
Our environment,
Yeah.
like our physical surroundings.
Well, yeah, but also the people you surround yourself with.
Oh, you mean like that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Exactly. If you're always around negative or unsupportive people, it's going to be way harder to change.
But the opposite is true too, right? Being around positive and encouraging people can lift you up.
Absolutely. They even share the story about how Erin, one of the hosts, joined an English learning community, and it completely transformed her experience.
How so?
Being around others who were passionate about learning English made her feel like she belonged and gave her that extra push to keep going.
I guess it's about finding your tribe, those people who get you and want to see you succeed.
Exactly. And that tribe doesn't have to be in person. It can be online groups, friends with shared interests, or even just a few people you trust.
It's all about building a network that supports and encourages you, especially when you're facing challenges.
So to recap what we've covered so far, roadblocks to change, the power of small actions, the importance of mindset, some tools to develop a growth mindset, and how our environment plays a crucial role.
And all of this through the lens of learning English. Pretty cool how they connect the dots, right?
Yeah, it's a reminder that learning can be a lifelong journey, and even when focusing on one specific skill, you can discover so much about personal growth. But before we move on, let's take a moment to think about how all this relates to you.
Yeah, good idea. It's a lot to take in.
What are some of the things that hold you back from growing? What small steps can you take to reach your goals? Who can support you along the way? Think about those things for a minute, and we'll be back to continue exploring.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a minute to really consider those questions. As we dig deeper into this English Leap episode, what strikes me is they don't sugarcoat things.
It's true. They
No.
could easily pretend personal growth is all rainbows and butterflies, but they don't. They actually spend a good chunk of time talking about those rough patches.
Those moments when your motivation just tanks, you hit a wall, and you start doubting everything. They don't shy away from that.
Right, like they're saying, hey, it's okay to feel this way, it's normal, which I think is super important because change can be uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it makes those struggles feel less isolating.
I think it helps to know that even people who seem to have it all figured out have also faced challenges.
Absolutely. It shows that setbacks aren't a sign of weakness. They're more like opportunities to learn and grow. They're part of the process.
They even talk about the importance of being kind to yourself, especially when you're feeling discouraged. They call it self-compassion.
Oh, that's so important. I know I tend to beat myself up when I make a mistake or don't meet my own expectations.
Me too. It's like we have this inner critic constantly judging everything we do, and that can be so destructive, you know? It zaps your motivation, your confidence, and keeps you stuck.
It's like a downward spiral.
Yeah.
So instead of listening to that inner critic, what do they suggest?
They encourage us to cultivate this inner voice of kindness and compassion. Like, talk to yourself the way you would talk to a friend you care about.
That's a good reminder. It's so much easier to be kind to others than to ourselves.
They even give some practical tips for doing this, like focusing on your strengths and celebrating even small wins.
Oh yeah, those are good strategies. And they connect back to that idea of mindset, right?
Exactly. Shifting from a mindset of scarcity and self-criticism to one of abundance and self-compassion.
And that shift can impact everything, our relationships, our work, our health. It's pretty powerful.
They also bring up a point about action being the best cure for fear and doubt. Even when you're scared or unsure, taking action can help you overcome those feelings.
It's like that saying, courage isn't the absence of fear, but doing something even though you're afraid.
Exactly. And that action doesn't have to be some big, grand gesture. It can be a small step, like making a phone call, writing a paragraph, or even going for a walk.
Just getting started is often the hardest part. But once you do, it can build momentum and confidence.
They make a great point about how, as you keep taking action and see progress, your confidence grows.
It's like a positive feedback loop, right?
Yeah.
Action leads to confidence, confidence leads to more action, and on it goes.
But of course, it's not always easy to stay motivated. There are times when you just want to give up, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. The challenges can feel overwhelming, and the motivation just disappears. So what do they say about those moments?
That's where the power of community comes in. Having that support system, whether it's friends, a mentor, or an online community, can be a game changer.
It's like having your own cheering squad, right?
Yeah.
People who get you, encourage you, and keep you accountable.
And it's not just about receiving support, it's also about giving back and supporting others.
Yeah, helping other people can actually be super motivating and empowering.
Like, we're all in this together.
Right, which leads to another interesting point. They make the importance of finding your why.
They say having a clear sense of purpose can really push you forward, especially during those tough times.
So knowing why you're doing something can give you that extra motivation to keep going.
It's like having a compass that guides you. And your why might change over time, too, as you grow and your priorities shift.
It's about being open to exploring new possibilities. But one thing that stuck with me was their point about embracing imperfection.
Yes. That perfectionism can be a major roadblock. Like, it can keep you stuck in this cycle of procrastination and self-doubt.
It's so true. We can be so afraid of making mistakes that we don't even try.
They encourage us to let go of that need for perfection and focus on making progress instead.
And they remind us that often our imperfections are where our greatest strengths and creativity come from.
Erin, one of the podcast hosts, shares a story about how she used to be terrified of speaking English because she was so scared of making mistakes.
Oh, I can relate to that. But what happened?
It was only when she let go of that fear and started speaking, even with errors, that she really started to become fluent and gain confidence.
It shows that we often learn the most when we step outside of our comfort zones.
They also talk about celebrating your wins no matter how small they seem.
Yeah, because it's easy to get caught up in what we haven't accomplished yet and forget to appreciate how far we've come.
Exactly. It's all about recognizing your progress and reinforcing those positive behaviors. So as we wrap up this part, let's take a moment to think about how this all applies to you.
What are some areas where you've been holding back out of fear? What are some small steps you can take to move forward, even if you're not totally ready or confident? And how can you build a more supportive environment for yourself, both internally and with the people around you? Take a minute to reflect on those questions, and we'll be right back to finish up our deep dive.
And we're back. You know, one thing that really stood out to me from the English Leap podcast is how they balance practical advice with, like, genuine inspiration. It's not just telling you what to do, but also giving you that motivational boost.
Yeah, it's more like a friendly chat than a lecture. And speaking of being mindful, one thing that resonated with me was their point about being careful about what we consume, Information overload is a real thing these days.
It's true. We're constantly bombarded with so much information from all sides. It's easy to get overwhelmed by all the negativity out there.
Totally. And they tie this back to the reticular activating system. Remember, that filter in our brains, if we're always feeding it negative news or comparing ourselves to others on social media, we're training it to focus on the negative.
So it's not just about avoiding the bad stuff, but also about actively seeking out content that uplifts and inspires you.
Exactly. It's about creating a positive mental space. Like, what are some things you do to nurture that positive mental space?
Well, I know for me, taking a break from social media and getting lost in a good book can be super helpful. It's like a mental detox.
Yeah, I feel that. And they also talk about how this idea of creating a positive environment extends to the people you surround yourself with.
Oh, yeah, the find your tribe concept, right. Surround yourself with people who get you, support you, and inspire you to be better.
Exactly. They even share this example of how Erin joined an English learning community and how much it helped her.
I remember that. It was about feeling a sense of belonging and having that accountability that helped her stay on track.
It's a good reminder that having people who understand your journey and support your growth can make a huge difference.
And remember, that tribe can be online too, not just people you see in person.
Totally. It's about building that network of support no matter where you find it. And sometimes creating that positive space might even mean stepping away from relationships that aren't serving you anymore.
That's a great point. Sometimes letting go of those negative or draining connections can be just as important as forming new ones.
It can be tough, but it opens up space for more positive and supportive relationships. Another thing that really struck me was their emphasis on action. They say that progress often comes before confidence.
Ah, yeah, that done is better than perfect thing.
Exactly. We often wait until we feel totally ready or have the perfect plan, but that can lead to procrastination and getting stuck.
Erin's story about being afraid to speak English because of making mistakes really illustrates that. She had to push past that fear and actually start speaking to gain fluency and confidence.
It's a reminder that we often overthink things and underestimate our own abilities.
So if you're waiting for that perfect moment to start, maybe this is your sign to just go for it.
Absolutely. Even if it's messy and imperfect, taking that first step is what matters. What's one small step you can take today to move towards your goals?
That's a great question for everyone listening. Remember, you have the power to make changes in your life, even if they seem small at first.
Those consistent efforts add up over time. It's a journey, not a race.
And like any journey, there will be bumps along the way. Be kind to yourself, celebrate your wins, learn from your setbacks, and most importantly, never stop exploring.
We hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought and a little boost of inspiration. If you want to learn more, definitely check out the English Leap podcast. They have a ton of great advice and encouragement for anyone looking to grow.
And that's a wrap for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, everyone.